Now, if you're a cook that's been cooking for many years and you're struggling with the simplest of cake, and you tend to think that at the end of the day, maybe it's you know, you're not made for baking, you don't have the affinity, everything you touch baking doesn't work. Well, let me tell you, you are not the problem. The problem lies in the association we make between cooking and baking. As cooks, we tend to think that they are somehow loosely related cousins, right? It happens in the kitchen, you can use bowls, utensils, whisks, spatulas, you got the oven, you got a recipe. A simple cake should work. You've got 10 years of experience or more in the cooking world. You know, why is it not working? Well, this association that we make is wrong, okay? Cooking and baking, in fact, live far, 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 far apart. And even worse, they got nothing to do with each other. They're virtually two different planets. There's really nothing similar about the two. Cookware on one side, bakeware on the other side, different tools, different utensils, different machines, different setup for your workspace, different ways of using the oven, different ingredients and different techniques. And there is no or next to no transferable skill as well. This is the reason. So you can't use your experience from cooking and hope to become a great baker or even make the simplest cake because you haven't learned the basics of baking. This is the problem. So we're going to be making here one of the biggest staples in France, the Gâteau Yaourt, the yogurt cake, really a foolproof recipe. And I'm going to making it with that baker's mindset. I'm going to leave my knowledge of cooking and I'm going to change my setup here. And I'm going to tell you all the little steps and pitfalls to avoid in order to make that cake properly. So we're going to have a nice looking cake, nice and moist. It's going to stay moist and it's a versatile cake that you can jazz up and add things to it and transform it into multiple versions of that cake if you want. Like this, you're going to build up your confidence and it's going to tell you that yes, at the end of the day, you can make a beautiful cake and learn more if you want to. Let's go. So here we are. This is my little baking setup. As you can see, I've got rid of everything that has to do with cooking. I don't have the garlics on the side. I don't have a big chopping board taking all the space. I don't have a knife or anything like this. I've got something totally different. A bench with plenty of space to work. I've got a stand mixer. I've got my cake pan on here, a brush, measuring cup, scales, whisk, bowl, and it's all I need. I don't need to go on the stove whatsoever, or what we're going to be needing here is the oven. So if you want to bake successfully, you need to take it seriously and stop mixing the two by having your cook set up and start to make a cake on top of that. No, when you're baking, you're baking. It doesn't matter how simple the cake is. Get into the habit of preparing your space for baking. And now let's look at the ingredients. All right, so we are making the Gâteau au yaourt, a famous French staple called the yogurt cake, and this is the first cake you learn to make when you're a child. So it is the most rudimentary cake there is, but yet, just to show you how baking is different than cooking, we need to pay attention to certain things. So the one thing to know is that when you bake, everything has to be precise. The ingredients using, it's all measured and it has to be precise. It's not like cooking that you can add more or less. It's very loose. In baking, it's a precise science. So because it's a children's cake, the measurement we use here is a little cup like this, a yogurt cup of that size. I'll tell you exactly how many grams. And it's a very simple ratio type of affair. Here we have 1 pot of yogurt, 2 pots of sugars, using that same one, 3 pots of flour, 3 eggs, and then some oil instead of butter to keep the cake very nice and moist in an easy way. Okay, so you cannot deviate by add more or less of things, otherwise it is not going to work. That's the first thing to know. The next is also to know that you have to use the right ingredients as they are stipulated. Plain yogurt, this is Greek yogurt, you could use something else. 3 whole eggs, nothing special here. The sugar, again, you can't change. It has to be a fine white sugar. Ideally, you can't start using a raw sugar or a brown sugar or anything else like you would think, oh, I'm going to change the recipe. No, you have to stick to what it says here. The flour is also surely one of the main reasons a lot of your cakes don't work, because you're using the wrong flour. Cakes, when you hear the name cake, you have to use what's called a cake flour. It makes sense, but it took some time for me to realize, oh, actually, I need cake flour to make a cake. I was buying all-purpose flour all the time and things were always failing. So what's the difference? Cake flour has got much less protein, less gluten, and it doesn't become elastic, and when it cooks, it stays nice and fluffy compared to the all-purpose or other flours that are stronger, like bread, and when you mix them, it creates this gluten chain, and when it cooks, it gets very hard, and you end up with a brick of a cake instead of something very airy and fluffy. So the flour is extremely important. When you make these types of cake, they need to rise a little bit, and you're going to be using typically baking powder. That's a typical kind of a chemical kind of a type of raising agent. But what I'm using, if you can find it in your country, this is a self-raising baking flour, which that thing has been already incorporated to the right measurements. So there's never just enough or not enough. It's got just the perfect amount so that your cakes rise normally without breaking, without making some crazy bubbles or anything like that. You'll find everything on the recipe card. You can make that recipe using just a bowl with a spatula and a whisk, but I'm going to be using here the stand mixer. So baking being baking, there's a lot of precision, there's a lot of order, it's very orderly. So the first thing we need to do is to take care first of the cake mold. So it is a typical loaf pan, I think you call it loaf pan, like a cake pan. This one has seen better days on here. And what I'm going to do here, instead of butter, I'm going to use a little bit of oil in here, and I'm going to brush the interior and the sides with oil. Once this is done, I'm going to use some flour, and I'm just going to throw it everywhere as much as I can on the sides to really coat the whole dish with flour. So you can turn it around, and we're going to try to spread it, and that's why I've got my tray on there, because after when it's done, remove the excess to end up with something like that. Next, I'm going to be making or mixing the ingredients using my stand mixer with the whisk attachment, but before we do so, we have to preheat our oven here at 180 degrees Celsius, I put the equivalent Fahrenheit, with a conventional heat. That means a heat that does not use the fan. So the fan is turned off. I only have the top and bottom element on. This is typically used by bakers when they make anything that needs to rise. So here, there's a baking powder in your cake, it needs to rise slightly. You don't want the fan. And now for the mixing. So as we've said, we're going to be using that pot. So there's one full pot of yogurt, and we're going to first using these wet ingredients. I'm going to empty the yogurt in, make sure you catch everything. Okay, another wet ingredient here, well, the eggs, and we can't measure. It's just the 3 eggs in here. But we have also the oil. The oil, you can put a whole pot. I've tested with half because it's a lot of oil there, but I'm going to use the traditional method here, up everything in here, and then we're going to start mixing the whole lot. So again, no need to get too fast. I'm going to make sure that everything combines nicely. And it needs to emulsify. That's one of the things with baking, we're getting that mass. Okay, it's nicely combined. And then we're going to be able to add the sugar in. Now for the sugar, for me I do something special. I'm using here, this is a container with all my vanilla pods that have been dried, that are mixed with sugar like this to make a vanilla sugar. So I'm having a mix here, you see there's little bits in there, that's why, so that's one pot, and I'm going to add the other. Perfect, so I'm adding my other pot on here. And if you're not happy, if you use standard sugar, you can add a teaspoon worth of vanilla extract. Of course, always make sure that you use a little spatula to scrap anything that's left. You want the precision in the measurement, otherwise it's going to be out of balance. And then I'm going to mix again. Maximum medium speed, and I'm going to wait maybe a minute or something like this. We want the sugar to dissolve. All right, that's good. Now we're going to be able to add the flour. So can you imagine the amount of stuff we had to take care of for that children cake already for it to be done properly? It's staggering. And when you reach to the flour stage, again, there's some things you need to be careful of. You can't just throw your flour in there. You have to sift the flour every single time when you make cakes. And you pass it through a fine mesh sieve, and that's what I've done in here. I'm also changing my attachment from a whisk to that little paddle attachment, because this moment when you add your flour is crucial to not fail your cake because of that protein or the gluten contained into the flour. So even a cake flour or anything, what you want is to incorporate the flour. You can do it by hand using a spatula for best results. So you don't beat the flour, because the more you beat it, like when you're kneading a bread, it's going to get elastic, it's going to get tough. All right? So I'm going to use a very low speed with that little attachment so it's not really beating the whole stuff until it's combined, and that's going to be it. So there we have it for the final step, paddle attachment. I've got the 3 pots of self-raising flour, otherwise you need to use baking powder mixed with the flour. I'll look in the ingredients to see, I think it's 1 teaspoon. And then very slowly, as I said, I'm going to incorporate. As soon as I've got a batter, I'm going to finish this with the spatula and we are done. Okay, it's pretty good. I'm doing 1 final acceleration, maximum this speed for a little bit to really combine everything for 30 seconds or something, and that's going to be it. So as I mentioned, I'm going to finish this by hand because there's always, you see, pieces of flour on the side. So I'm going to just get everything into a nice batter, gently. And we've got a batter for our yogurt cake. So I've got the cake pan. I'm going to try to pour this in. And that's going to be it. And make sure to catch everything on the side, of course. And there we are, all that work just to get this. Can you imagine? I've got my timer on 40 minutes for a conventional heat, so no fan. If you use a fan force, I've seen people online taking a knife and making a straight line in the middle to leave some kind of steam to escape or anything like that. I haven't tried that. I've seen it actually in a pastry chef book. He was recommending to do that. So if you want, you can take a knife, put a slit in there, and then in the oven, which is what I'm going to do. And I'll show you the result when it's done. Finally, the yogurt cake is out of the oven, and I can tell you with conventional heat, things are very slow. It is very slow. It's slowly but surely. 55 minutes it took me to have that really rustic look, and it did crack a little bit in the middle. Not an overall problem. I think I like the rustic look, but it's got really the nice look of a proper cake. You know, it's not kind of dryish or anything. It's got this nice brown crust on here. Still very appetizing, and it's still very, very tender and soft. We can't take it out of the mold just yet. You really need to wait 5 or 10 minutes or something, and then we're gonna pop it out and put it on the cooling rack. So very impatient as always. I've taken a knife and I've run it around the side there, and it's still very, very, very hot, but it should, yes, pop up there. Okay, let's have a look. All right, so this is it on here. I can't move it too much. This is the side, I mean the underside, there's no hole or anything like this. That's a nice loaf, and it's very, very soft. That's gonna tell me that when it cools down, it's gonna be really moist and delicious. So you can't, again, it's like a steak. You have to leave this to rest at least until it's lukewarm. So I'm gonna have to wait at least 30, 40 minutes before I can do anything with this. Okay, so the cake has totally cooled down. I actually purposely left it in my cupboard, in my pantry, overnight, just to show you that this cake really stays moist and it still nice and bouncy. And typically you cover it with a cloth overnight. And then here it is. You can see these nice colors on here, the nice yellow. We're just gonna cut a slice and see how it looks inside. So I'm not trying to impress everyone in here. This is the most simple cake there is in France, but it's just a staple that is basic, but it tastes good. It's got the right kind of consistency. So I'm just gonna get off that crust on here first. Okay, and look at that. Look at these little bubbles. It's really, really soft. It's a nice loaf, and it's perfect for, it's called a travel cake. You can give this to kids. When they go to school, you can bring this to a picnic at someone when you're traveling, you know, you're going somewhere in the car, you can have this, and you get this beautiful, moist, look at this. If you break it, it's got the perfect kind of consistency, and this is really what I consider a successful cake. Let's have a look. So, it's got that simple vanilla flavor. And you may think at first, oh, you know, it's a simple one. You know, in front of the TV, you have a bit of a bite, but you will find yourself coming back to it again and start to slice, and the cake would be gone. But let's talk about what you can do with this now that you got the base recipe. So to finish, here we have the Gâteau au Yaourt, the yogurt cake in its plain glory. It will stay moist for 48 hours, but once you've mastered that technique, okay, making sure you use the right flour and the right temperature, the right settings on your oven, and you get this totally right every single time, you can start to add things to your batter. So if you want to add fruits, you can add pieces of apple, pieces of pears, you can add dry fruits, walnuts, pecan nuts, dates. You can add liquor if you want. If you want to jazz it up with Grand Marnier, you can use some rum if you want, or other liquor that you like. You can have lemon zest, orange zest, and if you also want to go further, you can put cocoa powder and transform this into a chocolate cake, a marble cake by doing half vanilla, half chocolate. And there's plenty of options. So what I would say, if you're someone that's really lose confidence in making cakes, use that recipe as a building block. Because it's got all these basic things to master first before you can go further. Of course, this is just a very, very, very beginning in the world of baking. There's tons of different things to learn. But I would say first, master a simple cake like this. And when you're confident, maybe we'll go to the next step, but it will be for another video. So I will leave you with this picture on here. And as always, I'll see you on the next video on the French Cook Academy. I hope you enjoyed this one. Let me know in the comment. Take care. Bye-bye.
My appetite, don't leave me here high and dry.